Hey guys, this is Otaku Oniel here, and I'm here to talk to you about what kind of Japanese animes I enjoy watching, which kind of genres I like, as well as some illustrated art books published in Japan that I've collected over the years. I have these art books here in my studio, and I will show those to you guys later in this video. But first, I want to start by telling you my life story as to how and when I had first immersed myself into watching anime early back in my life. Like I had mentioned to you guys in my previous video, that I grew up as a child back in the 1980s. And at that time, growing up here in the States, one of the very first animes I had ever watched was Voltron Defender of the Universe and Robotech, as well as Ronin Warriors. And what's interesting is that at the time, nobody in the US knew that these cartoons were animes, and yet they became so popular in the United States. I was only 5 years old at the time, and back in those days, the term anime didn't even exist until a decade later when popular cartoons like Dragon Ball Z and Pokemon began steadily becoming mainstream in the US. I remember going to high school in the 1990s, and it was such a great time to grow up because of how simple life was back then. Japanese animation in the 1990s was just becoming familiar to many people here in the United States. And later on during that decade, popular TV shows like Toonami and Cartoon Network would feature popular animes like Outlaw Star, Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, and Cowboy Bebop. When I was 16 years old, I was lucky enough to come across a video game store in Westside Orlando where I grew up, and that place was called Game Masters. I met this awesome guy that worked there. His name was Lewis, and he showed me in the back of his store an entire rental section of Japanese anime on video cassette. Every category, theme, and genre you can think of: hentai, cyberpunk, romance, J-drama, comedy, etc. So then I got really intrigued and curious with what I had seen, and then eventually started renting these animes on video cassette, beginning with animated feature films and TV series like AKIRA and Bubblegum Crisis. But the very first anime feature film I had ever seen was Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind from Studio Ghibli of Japan. I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 6 years old in my mom and dad's apartment in Chickasaw Trail, Orlando. I sat down in front of the TV and started watching HBO. Then that channel started playing this animated cartoon, narrating a story about a raging war between humanity and these giant insects in a post-apocalyptic future. I still remember everything about that animated film, like the legend of the fire demon or giant warrior that laid asleep underground for more than 1,000 years until it was discovered by an invading army led by Queen Kushana. And she tried to use the fire demon as a weapon of mass destruction against the Ohm, which are the giant insects that inhabit the toxic jungle. The time period in this story was the result of the shifting of the planet's ecosystem, which nearly wiped out all of humankind. And all of this happened during the collapse of global human industrialization. And over the next 1,000 years, the toxic jungle had emerged, which spawned an entire race of giant insects. Nausicaa, a beautiful young princess with a unique and mysterious gift of befriending a connecting relationship with these giant insects, eventually becomes mankind's savior, and Nausicaa ends the war between the giant insects and the humans. And I love that badass glider that she has. Wonderful story, uniquely imaginative, and I love the music in that animated film composed by Joe Hisaishi. Hayao Miyazaki, who directed and created this animated masterpiece, was the brains behind the story, as well as many others, in future animated films that would emerge years ahead, like Princess Mononoke, Spirited Away, My Neighbor Totoro, and Pompoko. Pompoko, or Heisei Tanuki Gassen Pompoko, is a Ghibli film that I particularly love because of the raccoon dogs in that cartoon that have magical powers and can shapeshift to disguise themselves from humans. A lot of what you see in Miyazaki's animated films reflect Japanese folklore and mythology, molded and narrated into some kind of fairy tale or legend. And there was a Super Nintendo game that I played way back in the day that narrated a Japanese tale of horror and mythology titled Musha, which literally means warrior. a pikeman named Imoto, who just battled and survived alone a bloody civil war during feudal Japan. And as he was traveling through the wilderness seeking refuge, he came across a village. And as he approached the village, it collapsed as the earth cracked up and opened from underneath. Imoto passes out and loses consciousness, but later on wakes up in some old man's home. Akagi, the old man who saves Imoto's life, tells him about a beautiful Shinto priestess, Shizuka, who was kidnapped by the army of the dead and taken to the depths of Tengumura. Imoto understands then why he alone survived that bloody civil war: to rescue Shizuka from the depths of hell only known as Tengumura, or the underworld. It's a really awesome retro video game with really nice music. You could say it's like playing a Japanese version of Castlevania, if that makes any sense. There's also the animated film Robot Carnival, which is a chronicle of different animated stories created by different animators, like Hiroyuki Kitakubo and Katsuhiro Otomo, the creator of AKIRA, which I'm sure many of you have seen. Both of these animated films were projects done at around the same time in the 1980s. I consider the 80s the golden age of Japanese animation because that decade had some of the best anime for every theme and genre that any viewer can appeal to. There's also the Japanese animated cyberpunk classic Bubblegum Crisis, a series of 8 animated episodes based on a future Mega Tokyo Japan in the year 2032, involving the adventures of the Night Sabers, an all-female group of mercenaries who don powered exoskeletons or hard suits and fight numerous problems within their society. Most frequently, maverick, rogue robots who pose an imminent threat to humanity. And I have this awesome illustrated art book based on the animated series that I want to show you guys by Kenichi Sonoda. I first bought this book over 20 years ago. I can't remember how, if I bought it online or from an anime manga sci-fi store like Enterprise 1701. Anywho, I accidentally left it at my Uncle Mike's house in Maryland the last time I stayed with him and my auntie. And over a year ago, out of the blue, my uncle had shipped it to my house in the mail, and I was shocked at the time because I thought for sure that this book was history. So I felt blessed to be able to get back this book because the original artwork here is very beautiful. Nothing digital here because the original artwork was produced in the 80s and 90s. There's also artwork here from the anime Bubblegum Crash, which aired in Japan in the early 90s, which I got to see on videocassette when I was still a teenager. The animated series was produced by Umex and animated by AIC and Artmic. And you have here other related illustrated artworks that are based on animes like Writing Bean and 80 Police Files. How many of you guys are familiar with the artist group known as Clamp? They are a renowned team of female manga artists who created popular anime and manga works like Cardcaptor Sakura, X1999, and Magic Knight's Ray Earth. They're basically an all-female manga artist group that started back in the mid-80s when they began their studio known as Manga Studio. Originally, Clamp was an 11-member group of manga artists creating doujinshi, or self-published fan works, and after that they began creating their own original manga in 1987. And I just happen to have here in my studio one of their illustrated books, based on their anime and manga creation, RG Veda. I believe this was an illustrated book that I bought over 20 years ago from that sci-fi store Enterprise 1701, and even the box cover art looks incredibly organic and immaculate. To me, it's very reminiscent of H.R. Giger's artwork, which is what inspired Ridley Scott to come up with the design concept of the xenomorph in the original Alien movie. H.R. Giger is a European artist from Austria who created a lot of dark and spooky, contemporary airbrush artworks that depicted blended human physiques and machines, better known as biomechanical. In this illustrated book, you'll see a lot of examples of attention to detail in folds and drapery, as well as the weapons and armor that are worn by these anime characters. Clamp has a style that stands out in a unique way compared to other Japanese animated works. And keep in mind, too, that this original artwork was produced in 1991 by Mokona and Nanase Okawa. So this was way before digital art had even existed. Same goes with today's technology and social media. So I'm very blessed and privileged that I still have this illustrated book. Okay, so let's talk about mecha anime. Now, when people mention this specific term, the first thing that comes to my mind are animes like Mobile Suit Gundam, Macross Plus, and Dangayo. Dangayo is a classic 80s vintage mecha anime that is about 4-star pilots that are under the command of a young girl named Mia Alice, who possesses the power of telekinesis but has no memory of her past. And these 4 pilots command these galactic fighter jets that transform and combine into a super robot, Dangayo, the most powerful weapon in the universe. Mia Alice and her teammates, Roll Cran, Lumba Lum, and Pi Thunder, work together to battle against the evil tyranny of Captain Galimos and Gil Berg. This anime was created by the same animation studio that brought Bubblegum Crisis back in the 80s. And I absolutely love their opening theme song titled Crossfight. Mobile Suit Gundam, or Kido Senshi Gandamu, is by far the most popular mecha anime franchise adored and admired by the whole world. Especially with Bandai's popular Gunpla subculture, which has to do with their real grade, master grade, and perfect grade Gundam model kits that are based on every single Gundam anime series ever created. There are other popular Gundam anime series like Unicorn Gundam 0096, as well as the Gundam Wing series, which I had first seen on Toonami over a decade ago. I'm pretty sure you can watch those animes now by downloading the Crunchyroll app on your iPhone or Android. And another really good mecha anime to watch is Mobile Suit Gundam 00 Celestial Being, which talks about the gimmick of the GN drive, and that is a secret technology that only the mobile suits in the Gundam project possess. I custom painted and built most of those master grade Gundam model kits based on that anime, like 002 Dynams, piloted by Lock-on Stratus, and 003 Kyrios, piloted by Alleluia Haptism. I also custom painted and built the Bandai Perfect Grade for the leader 001 Exia, piloted by Setsuna Seiei. And that was probably the most expensive build I had ever done, complete with the action base and the Bandai LED unit fully installed inside the inner frame. I had watched much of the first and second season episodes of Gundam 00 on Crunchyroll, so I have a deep love and admiration for that particular mecha anime. So if I had to pick a #1 favorite Gundam anime, it would be Gundam 00. I think many of you are probably wondering how I first developed a fascination with the Japanese language, culture, history, society, and anime. And it all started way back when I got my first Super Nintendo when the console had first launched in the early 90s. I was 12 years old, and at the time I read a lot of popular video game magazines like Nintendo Power, just to keep myself up to date on the latest developments. And after that, I remember renting this Super NES game developed by Konami called The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, or Ganbare Goemon. It's a 1 to 2 player game that narrates an adventure in Japan that you embark on, and you basically end up going on a quest to rescue the Emperor's daughter, Princess Yuki. And also lots of subquests that you get to play, earning newer, better items, building stronger weapons, as you're venturing all across Japan as the protagonist, Kid Yang, but his true name, Goemon, sounds much better. There is also his companion, Dr. Yang, but his real Japanese name is Ebisumaru, which also sounds much better. My favorite stage in that video game is the Otafu Palace, where you end up rescuing the ninja woman Yai at the end. And the amusement park stage where you can play all kinds of minigames, like Gradius at the arcade, as well as puzzle mazes to find hidden treasure, lottery, quiz shows, and even horse racing. Last but not least, I want to talk about Bishoujo anime. Bishoujo, which literally means beautiful girl or cute girl character. Every time I hear that Japanese word, One of the first things that comes to my mind is one of my favorite Nintendo Switch games, Senran Kagura Peach Ball. It's a 3D pinball adventure game with lots of cute anime female characters dressed up in kinky costumes and outfits. I think a better example of Bishoujo anime would be Queen's Blade, which is an all-female cartoon that narrates a story about a sacred tournament that is held once every 4 years to determine a queen. And these women who participate and compete in this tournament all come from different cultures and civilizations. Like, for example, Lena of the Vance family. She is the middle child of 3 sisters who came from a family of aristocratic nobility. And Lena is next in line to become the successor. However, she has no intention of becoming a countess, and she ends up running away and ventures in the outside world, and she then ends up becoming a warrior like her late mother Maria. And Lena eventually becomes a contender of the Queen's Blade tournament. I have a printed image of her here along with her 2 sisters, the redhead Claudette, that's her older sister, and Elena, her younger sister, the baby, and you can see her combing her sister's hair because it's her favorite thing. So in the realm of Japanese anime, you will see a lot of examples of Bishoujo anime. Some other good examples are Supersonico, Oh My Goddess, and The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. There's also an anime called Ranma One Half by Lumiko Takahashi. She is the same manga artist that created Inuyasha, which I'm sure many of you had seen on Toonami and Cartoon Network. So over the last 30 years of my life, I definitely got a lot of inspiration from watching various types of animes in different genres. And hearing about all these different stories created by these artists has given me a lot of ideas to brainstorm in creating my own original characters, like my project, The Bionic Soldier 6, which I'm still fleshing out and perfecting little by little. So watching anime and reading manga is definitely something I never grew out of, even now at 45 years old. So that's it for my life story, venturing through Japanese anime and manga. I will be creating more fun and cool video content like this in the future, so be sure to stay tuned, everybody. And of course, I want to hear any feedback, questions, or comments that you may have on this awesome topic, because when it comes to talking about Japanese anime, I can talk to anybody about this all day and never get tired. Just like all of my favorite movies, sitcoms, and cartoons I had watched as a kid growing up in the 80s. There's always something to talk about, there's always a type of theme and genre that can appeal to anyone. Thank you for your continuing support, everybody, and be sure to smash that like button and subscribe to my channel. And don't forget to tell your colleagues, family, and friends about me. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you on the next video.